Hello and welcome to this live stream. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. I'm Nick Dixon here with Mr. Ed Dutton of the Jolly Heretic. How are you doing, Ed?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm going to drink Diet Coke on the stream, and even if it dissolves my teeth, I don't care.
Ed, you made a schoolboy error there, referring to something that was talked about off stream, so no one knows.
You're not allowed to do that. Oh, sorry.
What you're talking about.
No, I'm okay. Yeah, I think you said to me a while ago, wouldn't it be cool to do a reaction to a Jonathan Bowden speech and to see how we react and stuff? And so I'm not sure. I've probably seen this one, but I'm not 100% sure. So it should be quite interesting.
Yeah. So, and by the way, before we went on, we had a debate about whether we should have the cameras on or off, and Ed won. I wanted them off. But this speech, we also had a debate about. I chose this one because it's quite prophetic and relevant to our current moment. Ed mentioned the Punch and Judy one, but that one's so kind of weird if you haven't seen him before. And obviously, and there is a remastered version of this speech, by the way, where it's like really good visual quality, but the audio was messing up my ears. It sounded harsh. So I've chosen this one just for all the autists. But just quickly as a disclaimer, obviously I'm a man of the centre left. I like the SDP and Nick Timothy and things like that. But I have an academic interest in these things. And Ed is the man who's literally written the book on Jonathan Bowden. So I thought, what an opportunity to get insights from the man himself.
This one here.
That's the one.
That's the one. Yeah.
So buy that now, and just to look at it from an academic perspective. And is there anything, Ed, you'd like to preface this with? Because when we do streams with Simon Roberts, he gives us incredible spiels of information. Because this one was from December 2011. And I realized after choosing it, actually, this was when Bowden was already not at the height of his powers and sort of suffering a bit with mental health things and stuff like that. But it's a later speech.
So yeah, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia in something like March 2011. I think that's right. Yes, and he was in a mental hospital till something like September, I think it was 2011. So this is not long after he has been released from the mental hospital, and it's not long before he died. He died in the March of the following year. So you may see evidence that he was on a very strong medication for schizophrenia. And people that saw his speeches and knew him said he was kind of a different person afterwards. He was still as intelligent, but the kind of the fire had gone to some extent. But he was still as perceptive and so forth. But he wasn't kind of as lively, wasn't as animated, wasn't as passionate. Because of course he's taking drugs which basically numb your feelings severely. And probably he was quite ill. He died of heart disease in the March. So probably you're going to, I don't know what I would expect to see from him, pale hands, for example, something like that.
Yeah, I watched this one before. I knew all of that. I mean, that puts a kind of dark, cast a dark shadow over it. But this was, it's still a great speech. And hopefully the tech will all work and we'll have all the usual autists complaining. I think I've streamed this in way too high quality by mistake. So we'll see what happens. But all right, that's the intro to it. Thanks for coming along, everyone. We'll start at any minute now. And Ed's underestimated how long these things take, but so we better get cracking. So let's just play. This is from December 2011, Vanguardism. And you can all tell us about the audio level of the speech and shout about
his best orator. So put your hands together, please, for Jonathan Bowden. Thanks very much for those warm words of introduction. This is a very difficult topic to speak about because it appears to be a depressing and pessimistic era where most of the storm and stress and most of the zeitgeist or spirit of the age seems to be against us. There's also a preponderance for people on the right politically to have metaphysically conservative views, which means they're often pessimistic, they're often loyal to Spenger's idea in the sort of 1920s and 1930s that optimism is a form of cowardice. And in relation to that sort of idea, the notion that one should be optimistic about the future is difficult to sustain. But given that the past speech was rather sort of statistical and slightly morbid in tone, my job is to not put a reverse spin on it, but at least to attempt to generate some optimistic energy. Now, there are more of us than ever before. But it's always a question of quality as against quantity in this life. Because I think what I'm going to propose is that instead of looking at demographic and quantity-based analyses, quantitative ways of looking at things. Let's look at qualitative ways of looking at things. Let's look at quality. Let's look at elitism. Let's look at the fact that all groups need a vanguard. I remember once a Times journalist asked me a very long time ago in relation to an event called the Le Pen Dinner, which is now 20 years old and more. He said, "What's your view of all this stuff about revisionism?" He said to me. This was in the hotel in Knightsbridge, Kensington, where the Pen and his guests were situated. He said, "What's your view of all that? Is it all true? Or contrariwise, is it all false?" And I said, thinking of some famous murder trial of the time, I use the example of the Wests, Frederick and Rosemary now, but of course this particular discussion predated that. I'd say, well, that trial, is everything that occurred in that court case all true or all false? He said, well, hold on a minute. Some of it's bound to be true and some of it's bound to be false. And I said, well, absolutely, that will go for revisionism as much as anything else. All revisionism is the ultimate defence of a particular vanguard at a particular time who believed that they were fighting for Western civilization. All elites and vanguard minorities is the radical consciousness of their own group. And just as people like Louis Farrakhan were mentioned earlier on, who's the leader of a sect called the Black Muslims, and just as they are in some respects totally unrepresentative of a lot of African American opinion, they nevertheless represent an ultimate readout, an ultimate salient or a bridgehead from which their population can go forth and from which it can gain energy and succor. And that's the way you have to look at these things. People need ultimate resources. They need absolutists and they need semi-fundamentalists who will stand up for them, at least in a conceptual way, even if they can't stand up for themselves, don't want to, or wouldn't even know how to. And the point of radicals, particularly radicals who deal with the politics of identity in any shape or form, is to provide that elite, is to provide that vanguard. You all know in the technology of a bullet, that a bullet is very significant in the impact it can have on a wall or a piece of wood or perforce the human body. But if a bullet is perforated at the top or has mercury injected into the top and is sealed in again, it becomes a far more devastating weapon. It becomes what's known as a dum-dum bullet. Now, if a vanguard is to have the effect of such retreated bullets so that conceptually and actuarially the energy and vigour of debate is transformed by the use of such a vanguard and its terminology, it has to be aware of where it's coming from, what its tradition is, where it's going to, and what it represents at a particular time. Just because most of the politics of this era seems to be running well and truly against us does not mean that the situation is hopeless, because situations are never hopeless. Groups that have been done down or perceive that they've been done down by history have undergone worse traumas than we are undergoing at the present time. The danger of the ideology of the victim, which
it's very interesting, the thing that he says about we need semi-fundamentalists. And I was thinking, well, what is a fundamentalist? A fundamentalist, normally, they're quite black and white in their views. They're quite dogmatic. They're quite certain. They're absolutely sure that God is on their side. And they're not interested in negotiation, really. They're not interested in. And Mrs. Thatcher said something very similar. She said, all of the great. You say, oh, you shouldn't bother with people that have black and white opinions. All the great religions of history are run by people that had black and white opinions and were absolutely certain of themselves, and that's who inspires us. So basically, we need people to be less thoughtful. We need some people that don't think too much and just say, we're going to do this and bugger it. And I just know.
A bit like people just starting to speak rather than saying pause, which is the agreement system.
Like the kind of person that would be so sort of dogmatic and socially confident that they would ignore the agreed system. That, but different. Okay.
Yeah, the thing I noticed was he's talking about situations are never hopeless. He's talking about that in 2011. Imagine talking about these kind of ideas in 2011. I mean, it's just before the sort of woke really kicked in. Most people place that as 2013, thereabouts. So but it was a kind of total doldrums. Now, of course, all kinds of people are interested in the Bowden-esque ideas online and so on. You've got Elon Musk sounding like Bowden with some of his posts. So it's probably someone like him now would be amazed at what had happened. But at the time, it's 2011, and you're just like couldn't really be any more in the doldrums with this kind of thinking. Would you say?
No, yeah, exactly. In 2011, there was no serious group of people. There was no serious backlash. There was no serious movement. It was getting worse, not even slightly better. It was just getting worse and worse and worse to the kind of tyranny peak of 2020, and then COVID and whatever. Where a friend of mine this is hopeless. This is just tyranny. This is just depressing. So it's that kind of person that at least superficially. Will say the fundamentalist will say it's never hopeless. God is there. Just keep fighting, and eventually the cycle will turn your way.
There's some evidence that he was right there. So anyway,
yeah, he was, but he had got a lot worse after him, though, didn't it? A lot worse after he died.
True.
I don't really subscribe to, except as a tactic on occasion, is that you begin to think like a victim and you begin to act like a victim. Many of our people now are almost asking for a whipping, asking for a collective beating, asking to be forgiven for the past, asking to be forgiven for sins and crimes of the past, which they never committed, which they're hardly aware of, which could be reconstrued as episodes of heroic cruelty or glorious vanguardism that don't even need to be apologised for in the past or in the present. And so there's a degree to which I personally think that the doctrine of vanguardism is the way out of the dilemma that we face. All communist movements believe that the proletariat needed to be saved from itself. They believe that the masses were degraded by feudalism and by capitalism. They believe that only an elite or a vanguard party could raise the masses up to socialism as the inverse of the capitalism they wish to replace. All communist movements that flourished in Western and other societies throughout most of the late 19th and 20th centuries based themselves on the vanguard principle. These movements were tiny, smaller than the number of people gathered in this room in central West London tonight, by a long way. When people include, I've got a book about literature at the moment on my desk, and in order to tabulate historical reliefs for literary points, they give the listing of events in particular years. And in one particular year, I'm not sure, it might be 1912, it talks about the Bolshevik and Menshevik split. It may have been in that year, it may have been in another year. That split happened in London. It happened in a pub in London. And all Bolsheviki and Mensheviki means is majority and minority. And there was a split between the two of them. And you can imagine them all with their beards and so on, haranguing each other and debating about whether there should be an instantaneous rising in Russia or whether they should wait for historical process to take its course, because Russia was not yet a capitalist society with a bourgeois class that could be overthrown and so on. The majority of Londoners, even from the ethnic groups that a significant proportion of those communists were drawn from, would regard all of that as idiocy and lunacy. Just as the bulk of white people today regard a significant amount of what we say as lunacy. All people who have a vanguard and elitist mentality are regarded as partly mad by their own groups, because the majority of people do not want to know. The majority of people wish to live their own life in their own way, and they only look at these broader questions when life impinges upon them and comes upon them, and the hand of life grasps them by the collar, and they really cannot do any other thing but notice what is in front of them.
Would you say that's happening now, Ed?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, is that what you were going to say?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, like absolute people that were normies 5 or 6 years ago, people that were clapping for the NHS, people that were, all that rubbish. It's those kinds of people. I mean, like my mum has just messaged me my mum is very, very normie, okay? And she's just messaged me to ask, she's just heard about Curtis Yarvin. And she said, have you heard of this guy? Have you heard of this guy? Have you ever met him? Have you interviewed him? I said, yeah, I've interviewed him twice. I've met him about 4 times. I know him. Yeah. So my mum has heard of Curtis Yarvin. On what planet does that happen? And so
your mum's just like, the thing about Carlisle, if we go all the way back to George III, and you're like, Mum, have you been watching too much Curtis Yarvin? That's because she was on the podcast with Alistair Campbell, wasn't he? Not she, not your mum, Yarvin.
No, my mum wasn't, but Curtis Yarvin was, and talking at Alistair Campbell. I'm surprised he agreed to debate him, really, considering how sort of based he is. And so my mum's heard of that. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's insane, and that's increasingly happening. It's impinging on ordinary people's lives. Once you put young men from across the sea in hotels in ordinary English cities that are 95% white or whatever, it's impinging on people's lives, ordinary people's lives, and that's it. And he's prophesying this.
I love how romantic you make it sound. Young men from across the sea. You sound like Ed Davey trying to sell it to us. But yeah, you're right. It was a good way of putting it for YouTube. Yes, and you've got Elon Musk posting like, we must fight or die out, and all this kind of crazy, like every day an Elon Musk post, you'd be like, really? Elon's quoting that guy? Okay.
And
yeah,
did you see old trophy head BBC guy Andrew Marr implying that deporting immigrants that don't bother to work will lead? What do you want? Blood in the streets?
Blood on the streets. I thought that was crazy because it's like, hang on, you say that Elon Musk is causing incitement when he says civil war is inevitable, which seems to just be an objective kind of analysis. But how is that different from Marr saying there'll be blood on the streets?
Right, that's basically inciting violence against those who would be accused of causing that by wanting to not give away lots of money to foreigners who don't work. So it's hitting even him. It's just getting gradually worse and worse. And Bowden, as I say, he articulates so well what's going to happen 15 years hence. So this is a very interesting book.
Many of the reasons our people do not seem to have a sense of solidarity amongst themselves in relation to the degree that some of the groups could be said to have is because a significant number of them have never been kicked, have never felt what it is as a group to be disprivileged in a society. Unfortunately, in certain areas of British and continental life now, and North American life, that process for some, and certainly not at the top or at the middle of the society, is beginning. They're beginning to realise what it's like to be a minority, or what it's like to be culturally disprivileged, or what it's like to be dispossessed in a way. Now, that spirit will grow, but it will only feed into consciousness in a number of select minds, because the bulk of people are not drawn to be in a vanguard formulation. People will only listen to a vanguard when they are desperate. They will only listen to a vanguard when they think there is no other hope. They would love many of the problems of contemporary Britain, many which revolve around the processes of immigration, to be solved. But they would love to have nothing to do with it themselves, and they would love that somebody came forward magically without trouble and without fuss to deal with it on their behalf. They want no unpleasantness, and they want no nastiness, particularly in their own name. But at the same time, if somebody does things of any sort that could be ascribed to that, they would run away and hide initially, be privately pleased, condemn the people who did it, support the people who were against them, and yet at the same time have a secret smirk and smile on their face about the whole thing, and they would do all of that simultaneously. And that's what people are like, and that's what our own people are like up to a point, and that's the funk and the state of internal confusion and bemusement that our people are in. Because every time they turn on the box in the corner, it says everything is marvellous and is all for the best, and that there is no need to worry, and that we're all sleepwalking towards victory. I read 1984 again recently. It's a good quarter of a century since I read that book. And it's a remarkably prescient work in every sense. Of course, it's a social democratic criticism of Stalinist authoritarianism. But in actual fact, Orwell's idea that everyone polices their thoughts before they speak, they even police the idea of their thoughts before they speak, is very germane to the present hour. I was with a relative of mine many years ago, and we were in a wood near Liverpool on our own, and he looked behind him before he made a politically incorrect remark. Because he was worried. He was worried to be alone in a wood with someone else. And if you remember, in the second section of 1984, Julia and Winston have their rather tawdry affair, it has to be said in a way, against the party, sort of sexist rebellion against the Puritanism of Newspeak and all that. And they go into the middle of a wood, and they go into the middle of a clearing of saplings in order to get down to it. And the reason that they do that is, one, of course, is because it's not in an urban area, and therefore there are no telescreens, these televisions that can look both ways, with the secret police, the thought police behind them. And on the other hand, there are no microphones, because wherever there isn't a telescreen, you can never vouchsafe that there isn't a microphone in that particular novel listening to you. And people are policed now by political correctness, which they adhere to, and which they go along with, and which they profess to love, whilst at the same time hating and despising, looking over their shoulder as they refute it and rebut it in the context of their own life. Because that's what the majority is always like. The majority is confused and inane and believes in the last thing that's ever said to them. Of course, in all societies, you have a hierarchy of knowledge and understanding. Probably about 40% of people are quite politically proficient, know what's what, vote to a certain degree, have a cynical regard for the system as it is, at least are compos mentis about the sort of culture and society they're living in. But a good 60% are not. There's a famous story about a Labour member of Parliament who went to a constituent's door. He was Dennis Potter, the playwright, who later emerged on the BBC. And he was a Labour candidate in his earlier vintage. And he'd knock on the door, and the woman and the husband would come to the door, and the woman would say, well, what are you going to do about immigration then? As a Labour candidate, as our candidate, as the candidate who'll speak to the truth to us, unlike the Tories. Now understanding, of course, that Labour is a centre-left party that believes in mass migration as a doctrine of law and morality, and whose Nationality Act of 1948 began the modern-day process of complete societal transformation, because as Attlee said at the time, if the races of this world are mixed together, there will be no more war. And that is an ideology which many of the old Labourites believed in, body and soul, from the anti-colonial movement from which they came. But the bulk of Labour voters thought that Labour stood for something quite different from that. They thought Labour stood for them, and for their family, and for their extended family, and people who weren't like the people who lived on the posher estate down the way who voted for another party. That's what they thought. But Potter had to answer this woman and her husband as they stood before him. And he said, well, what do you mean? Labour is in favour of fairness for all. A politician's answer, of course, even on the doorstep. And she said, oh, but there's too many, and they're taking over the centre of town, and I don't feel safe anymore, and things have changed out of all recognition. And some of what that chappie Not Powell says, I don't like him because he's a Tory, but at the same time, it's got some truth to it. And all the time, Potter was wanting to reply. He was wanting to reply that you're a bigot, I don't want your vote, I don't want it even if you're prepared to give it to me under other circumstances where you said you repudiated what you just said. And all the time, his agent was kicking him, in the back of his heels, as if to say, come on, there's plenty of other doors, there's plenty more to do, Dennis, there's plenty to get the sort of the red ribbon vote out. Let's leave them to themselves. They'll probably vote Labour anyway, as indeed they will. And he kept kicking him and so on. And in the end, Potter said, Labour's in fairness of all, but of course, we'll listen to your concerns, madam. We'll listen to your concerns. And as he was turning away from the agent said, and what will it be then? To the husband, who'd obviously not really got a word in beforehand. And the husband said, oh yeah, we'll vote Labour as normal, because you listen to what we say. And they're not alone, because there's millions like that, millions and millions like that. The politicians will sort it out. Politicians left to themselves will do something to make sure that things won't get as bad as they could be. The other thing you often hear about...
There's a few things there that built up that I wanted to say, but I like that we're not pausing it as much as some of these streams. But one, he kind of mentions what now is known as two-tier. I like the idea, by the way, we just watch the whole thing in silence. That's my ultimate goal, but that's a kind of a postmodern idea. One is he mentioned basically what is now called two-tier justice. People are suddenly feeling like, oh, hang on, they're second-class citizens, essentially. The other thing I was thinking when he said, it was hilarious, the bit about the wood, not saying something politically incorrect in a wood, just reminded me of being in the woods, because you mentioned COVID. In 2020, I was in the woods near my house. There was a woman like sat on a log, not near anyone, not even near anyone within the context of the wood, wearing a mask. And I just thought, you're alone in a wood wearing a face mask, just the insanity of that. And then he said that 60% are not clued up on politics. I was thinking, what is the percentage now? Must be absolutely massive, 90%. And then he also mentioned the 1948 Nationality Act, which Enoch Powell was very concerned about. If you read Heffer's biography, he was very worried about that, already causing all sorts of problems. You don't hear about that too much. You hear about the Blair era, but you had the 1948 Nationalities Act, which caused a lot of problems. Then you had the
My understanding is that Attlee was very concerned that he didn't think all these immigrants from the West Indies or whatever on the Windrush would come. He didn't anticipate that. He thought there might be a few people that would come, but he didn't anticipate that there would be this mass movement of people, and he didn't anticipate what kind of people there would be. And there were letters at the time, very concerned letters written about this is a problem. We need to do something about this. But it was too late by then because they passed the act.
Yeah, at the time they were much more concerned about their obligation to the sort of subjects of the empire, and we should welcome them. How it would be beastly not to. They just had no conception, and you couldn't travel as easily then, so they had no conception of what this was going to lead to. And then the 1965 Race Relations Act kind of enshrined what we now think of as two-tier justice. But that's a whole other topic. Anything you wanted to add on that, Ed? That whole.
Well, I assumed that the joke was because we used to walk the dog in Wisley, woods in Surrey in the 90s, and you'd often see like two young blokes emerging from the trees, and I assumed it was an allusion to cottaging, which is and obviously the kind of people that would engage in cottaging will be quite left wing. And so, in that sense, you should look behind you before you say anything politically incorrect.
In case cottagers come out of the
woods. Just in case there are woke people in the woods.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's what I assumed that. Or the other woke people you get in the woods are those weirdos that dress up and do historical reenactments of battles and stuff, like Treasure Trap or whatever. It's called, like Dungeons and Dragons.
And that's our people.
No, that's not. That's weirdos. That's left wing people.
I thought you meant the war reenactment people that you get as well, don't you?
Oh, I suppose maybe some of those people are based. But when I was at university, the people that did the kind of dressing up as medieval people, they crossed it very, very strongly with the LGB group and whatever. So yeah, nerds, exactly. So that was my concern. But he's spelling it out very, very well and very, very clearly. And even though he's not as exciting as he is in other speeches, it's not as many jokes. He's not as kind of excited because he's on drugs. It's still a very well articulated speech.
And that's why we're not as excited either, because we're also on drugs watching it, of course, because we wanted to get the full experience.
Yeah, we've both taken schizophrenia medication in order to get the full reproduction.
My hand's shaking, and I'm just keeping it in check. Yeah, that's apparently his hand was shaking in this time as well. It's very sad.
There's a Japan one.
It's in your book.
It is, yeah. Well, you can't see it in this one, but you can see it in. I think it's a bit earlier, a bit more recently after he's released from the hospital, and you can see his hand shaking. In the Japan, there's a speech about some Japanese guy, and you can see his hand shaking. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, the chat is saying, talking about cottaging, Dutton moment, and someone else says, bizarre cottaging diversion, Ed, Douglas says. So, classic Ed, bringing the cottaging references. I was trying to stay highbrow, but it's all right. So it's all welcome.
About his death. People say, it's not going to happen while I'm around, therefore I don't need to bother about it. I've heard lots of people say to me, it's all 40 to 50 years off. Who knows what will happen? I can't do anything. You can't do anything. So what's the point? In any case, I'll be dead.
Very much what Richard Tice said recently, by the way.
Dead by then anyway, or gaga, or very elderly, and so on. You hear that again and again. Because, of course, what you had in modern Western societies is the extreme powerlessness of the individual. The individual, apart from it maybe in consumption and expenditure of cash, the average individual feels totally cut off from the external society. It's what I call deep privatization. Privatization in the 1980s and the 1990s meant the disbursement of public utilities and was a sort of Thatcherite and neoliberal ideology. But privatization has actually gone much deeper than that. It's the view that each is out for himself, and society hardly exists beyond the confines of one's own family, one's own extended family, and people that one happens to know. And people feel not just sort of deracinated, but depopularized and de-democratized, if there are such terms. And people are, in extraordinary sense, alone with the television, alone with the telescreen, which when they flick from channel to channel, tells them all the time that everything is perfect, and there are only nasty-minded people who will stir things up as vanguards and various forms of extremism. Extremism, of course, is something always to be rejected.
No, this is interesting, because if you think back to 2011, when this was, the idea that, the television, the commercials, whatever, are telling you everything's fine. And I think this is just before you started getting commercials going mad and basically English people being banned from television commercials. Or certainly normal English couples being banned from television commercials. That hadn't happened yet. So now I suppose television commercials are actually telling you, if only subconsciously, no, everything is not well. Everything is not well with the land. And indeed, they're trying to humiliate you and trying to make you feel that you have been taken over, and just trying to make you feel, just to dispirit you and make you despondent. That's what they're actually trying to do.
Interesting. I viewed that more as a continuity, that the TV was always pushing the liberal managerial elite agenda, which it still is now, by presenting no English people ever on telly, etc. So in a way, it's still telling you everything's fine, but fine from the regime's perspective. But you're sort of saying they've gone so extreme that you can't watch the TV without going, hang on, what's going on anymore, basically.
Yeah, they've gone so extreme that it's almost making people, that they're trying to humiliate people. That's how their fear being overthrown almost, or it's just gone so extreme that it's gone into the realms of presenting everything as okay, like the kind of idea that if it was a time of crisis, you might put keeping appearances on or something, or that sketch in the day today, where we have a special film that is held reserved for times of crisis, right? And there's the policeman looking for a lighter, and all these children come around with lighters. Right? That sort of thing, that sort of commercial. That's what commercials did. That's what the Bisto gravy commercial or whatever. That's what they did, and they reflected back this Britain where everyone's happy and everyone's English, and maybe there's a few non-English people, but that's okay because we like it like that and everything's okay. But when it gets to a point where there's just basically no English people ever, and certainly no English nuclear families, it's always a half foreign or something, then suddenly they're actually reflecting back to you something quite different, or they're trying to.
Yes, and the exception now is in line with what you mentioned, is the war adverts. When you get suddenly a load of English blokes going to war. What's going? They need recruits, and that's the only time you get a normal advert.
Or adverts aimed at pensioners that are asking them, to take out insurance for their funeral or something.
Right. Oh yeah, or of course assisted dying in Canada. Kill yourself. You're white. Kill yourself, or go to war, or get a pension. Those are the options.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
All right.
So he's a bit behind the times.
But I think extremism is necessary. I think it's socially and mathematically necessary, because there has to be a logic to the logic of logic. There has to be something which takes the argument out to the furthest point on the circle. In maths, if you have a curve, you have a line that penetrates it at the furthest extent. And I believe that there has to be a logic that, in the realms of sanity and within the realms of what's possible, bisects the line at the most radical point. And that's what the people in this room are. That's what vanguard forms of identity amount to. They are the most radical manifestation of the implicit sense of becoming and belonging and identitarian man and womanhood of the ordinary people in one's own group. And you have to manifest that, and you have to represent it. And only by doing so can you have a certain effect, because you do have an effect by virtue of existing. There are many other groups on this planet who always ask a question when anything happens: is it good for us? Is it good for us, or is it bad for the others? But most people think, actually, is it good for us? Far more people, even of a more vanguard or elitist temperament, are prone to say, is it good for us, rather than is it bad for the others? Because contrary to liberals, who always think that positions of identity are based on the idea of doing others down, principles of identity are usually based on boosting or to use an ugly contemporary phrase, bigging up one's own group. People actually think more positively about themselves than they did before they get into negativity about others, contrary to the view that politics of identity is all about negativity towards others. And as long as you can suppress that through political correctness, everyone can live happily in a multi-cult, a multi-identity firmament or melting pot. I think the point to make about vanguardism is whenever anything happens, people in other groups and people in other vanguards and liberal humanists in our own group, because the previous speaker said quite truthfully that it is indigenous liberals who are our real enemy. Indigenous liberals are always the enemy. Liberalism within ourselves is always the enemy. It exists even in people who regard themselves as radical to a certain extent. We've had liberalism in an uninterrupted way for centuries. Russia's never known a liberal regime. And whether one likes it or not, the politics of contemporary Russia have a lot to do with the fact that they've never known a period of liberalism. You could argue that since the restoration of the monarchy in the 1600s, we've known nothing but various forms of liberalism, most of which linked to various elements of the Protestant religion during that time. But until about the 1950s or 60s, most forms of Protestantism retained residual, illiberal, and patriotic ideas, as for a period they did in a very sectarian way in Northern Ireland. So all views have their liberal side. Even hardliners have their liberal side, which they have to guard against, and guard against chipping away.
I like the idea of purging our inner liberal. That we all have this liberal inside us that says, "Look, have compassion for these people."
Shut up! You can imagine Bowden.
No. You must rise above your inner liberal that says inside, "Have compassion. Give them a second chance." You're someone that comes up and says, "Oh well, I used to be really, really left wing, but now I've seen the error of my ways. Can I join in what you're doing?" No, you can't. You used to be left wing. You're mentally ill. Get out. Get out. You're not coming in.
I'm just imagining Bowden in his Punch and Judy speech mode, but with his inner liberal going, "Get down." Yeah. That is very much it, the inner liberal. Yeah, good point. Let's crack on then.
Liberalism also feeds on indifference, and indifference to the future, and indifference to the generations that are coming in the future. But vanguardism is something different, because it lives for the virility of what might be in the future. And make no bones about it, what vanguard Caucasians think about their future is watched and is listened to by liberals and by all the other groups. So the idea that what we do and what we say and what we think has no relevance or no purport is not true. What is true is that competition between groups is part of the stuff of life. And the contemporary society is based upon the formulation that that is not the case. And because it is the case, nature will trump all of the liberal arguments. The problem is that if it doesn't take a political form, nature's trumping of liberalism will be a very painful process to live through. A very painful process for ourselves, for everybody, and for all other persons in other groups. That is why we have to continue with putting forward percussively the politics of identity from our own standpoint. Let's take something in the news at the moment. There's a large cranking up and there's a building up of energy for
I don't know if Nick has paused this or if the stream has stopped and I'm here on my own talking to you.
An attack on Iran. At the moment, it appears that their nuclear technology is of dual use, but all nuclear technology is of dual use. When we developed a nuclear weapon, the Americans were staunchly opposed to us possessing it because they wished to live in a unipolar world where only one power had that particular device. Of course, all other major nations were working on these devices. I believe 34 other countries are developing some sort of nuclear program at the present time, including Saudi Arabia, because they fear that Iran is doing so nearby. But let's look at it another way. Is it in our interest that Iran is attacked? Is it in our interest that Iran is attacked? And the answer has to be that it's not in our interest. And it's not in our interest because they're not natural friends of ours, not natural enemies of ours. They exist in a different part of the world. They exist in a post-imperial situation now. We do not wish to be dragged willy-nilly into yet further wars after Iraq and Afghanistan at America's and Israel's behest. And as soon as one factors into the question vanguardism and group identity, it becomes quite clear that the Times and the Economist and all of these neoliberal and neoconservative journals pushing for an attack upon Iran is not in our interests. And other groups configure what goes on in the world directly as whether it's in their interest or not. In a confused way, our people aren't bothered whether Iran's attacked or not. Our people sit there watching the TV and think if the Israelis do it, well, I don't know what I think, really. You know, somebody down the pub said it was a good idea. I've got no idea myself. Can they refuel their jets without American help? They'll need American help. If the Americans asked us to help, will that drag us into it? Most of our people would probably consider, is there a danger of a backwash of Islamist radicalism against us because we are lying against Muslim nations elsewhere on earth? Which is not a stupid thing to think, actually, and which is probably one of the more credible, middle-ranking opinions that people, as they sit in the front of the television, would come out with. But if our people began to think more in terms of an identitarian prospect, they would nevertheless come to the conclusion that it's not in our interest to attack Iran. And that's just one issue out of an enormous number that could be pre-configured. Is it in our interest to...
Isn't it interesting? What are we, about half? Isn't it interesting that... So he's on medication to make him not mentally ill. And as a rule, we know that actors are high in mental instability. Comedians are obviously high in mental instability. Charismatic... Yeah, okay. Charismatic, yeah, because you became too well. Charismatic speakers are high in mental instability, and that makes them prone to things like narcissism and fantasy and all this sort of thing. And he's literally taking drugs to stop that being so. And you can see the effect on this speech. This is a period of the speech it's not really that interesting, is it? It's not really that inspiring. He's not really saying that much. It's not really gripping people in a way that some of his stuff has. And it seems to be all because he's taking head drugs. So that's the variable. It's like when Phil the Power Taylor lost weight and became shit at darts, and then put the weight back on again and became good at darts again. You need to be fat to be good at darts, and you need to be a bit mental to be good at public speaking, it seems.
Yes, it's a bit like when Chandler in Friends lost his third nipple and worried that he'd lost his sense of humor. Do you remember that one?
No, but I can see that the things would be
connected. Said, the source of all my power, because suddenly he wasn't funny and he thought he'd lost his powers. And aren't you a sort of comedic, charismatic speaker? Aren't you sort of implying you've sort of got mental illness problems there?
I don't know, but that is for others to. That is for just like that is for others to think and say. But,
sorry, that was rude. Carry on.
No, but like in the same way that, as in the words of Stuart Lee, I'm not saying I'm Jesus. That's for others to say.
That's for others to say.
But I think that there is some truth in that. That it's the people that come across often among people I know as well that are very, even with women, you see it. Women that are very charismatic and make you laugh and brilliant and amazing fun and all that are often absolutely crazy, and have sort of borderline personality or something and cut themselves. Yeah. And I think that you can see this change with Bowden. It's very clear. He's taking medication. It's calming him down. But there's a plus side to being crazy, which is that you can sort of adopt a highly confident, humorous persona and take risks, comedic risks, for example. And they pay off, and it makes for a more inspiring speech.
Well, if we ever watched the Punch and Judy one, we could contrast it with that, where he's just full on absolute mental, and in many of his speeches, much louder and much crazier and much wilder. As you say, this was very much the medication, as you said. And hopefully I'll have better internet connection. I've never had internet connections before, problems before ever until today. So sorry about that. It might happen again. Yes, but let's press on then.
Help bail out the euro. Is it in our interest to engage in yet more wars with the United States of America? Is it in our interest to have American bases on our own soil? Is it in our interest to endlessly have a culture of Marxian deconstruction on over all of our media in comparison to what pre-existed the relative social conservatism of the 1950s? If you slot in all of these ideas, which the masses of people are completely unconcerned about, and yet ask an identity-related question, you come up with the answer that it's not in our interest. Then you need to switch the questions around and ask, are there certain things which are in our interests rather than against our interests at a particular moment in time? Is it in our interest for a significant proportion of our media to be owned by foreigners? Probably not. Is it in our interest for a considerable part of our media to be owned by pornographers? Probably not. Is it in our interest for much of our banking and for much of our media to be totally international and to have no national specificity at all? Probably not. Is it in our interests that so many of our politicians are part of a jet set, international and humanist class that sees Britain as a puddle to their own self and corporate advancement? No, it's not. As soon as you factor into all of these questions, vanguard and elitist propositions on behalf of a group, you come up with an interconnected series of answers about what's in your interests and what's not. When Tony Blair went to war over Iraq, he said it was in our interests to hug America close. And he was part of an ideology called hug them close. This is the idea that you never allow, particularly if you're a social democrat in the British context, on the right of the Labour Party, any blue water at all between what you and what American foreign policy wants at any particular time. Even if privately you don't agree with a lot of it, you still, in a Gaitskell-like way, go along with it. But is it in our interest to behave in that manner? When we tried to act independently in what may well have been a folly-laden enterprise, which was the Suez operation in 1956, America slapped us down, slapped us in the face and swam the chops. And we had no particular answer either. When a run on the pound was engineered by the United States in order to humiliate this country and show it the error of its ways in going for some unilateral action with the French and the Israelis, but not at the behest of American power as it manifested at that particular moment, we were shown what was what. And it's interesting to note that amongst the extraordinary memorialism, which is part of contemporary culture, where obscure Olympics are remembered, and Manchester United's victories in the 60s are remembered, and various other events are churned over by the media, Suez is never dwelt on. Suez is never mentioned. 50 years on from Suez receives this much attention, and the reason it does receive no attention is because it was a rank humiliation for the then ruling class in this country, who learned some very salient post-war lessons, and that was that you keel to the United States like an aggressive bulldog and never basically venture to do anything without their cognizance. And part of the multi-ethnic reconfiguration of these islands is American by proxy, because everything that happens there happens here with a slight time lag, because we have modelled ourselves upon their model of near open borders and fiscal and capitalist movement of money all over the world, whereby communist China now controls large sections of the debt mountain that holds up the United States, and where two systems that could be said to be at war with each other ideologically, ultra-capitalist America and post-communist China, actually have each other in a handshake as well as round the throat, because they now rely on each other to prop each other up in the chaotic world system that now has evolved. The euro is in desperate trouble, and the Chinese were asked last month to help bail the euro out, and they refused. And quite rightly they refused, because it's not in China's interest to bail out the European economies unless they are reduced to an African level where they can buy country by country. As you know, China is buying up Africa. They basically say that they say to the black Africans in the sub-Sahara, unlike the whites and unlike the Arabs, we've never oppressed you. Let us buy your country. And they're transforming Africa. Eventually there will be, and there partly are, Chinese cities in Africa. It's not a stupid idea. They will begin running the bureaucracies. They will end up with their own demographic change. And with a smile on their face as they do it, they will take that continent. There's a new scramble for Africa, and it's not Europeans who are doing it. Our time over there when South Africa went has gone. The problem is not the dispossession of our colonial elites of the past, but the dispossession of our communities at home in the future and in the present. But my view is that as long as there is a vanguard to put forward the proposition of an exclusiveness for ourselves, there will always be hope. And that is independent of political parties. Political parties come and go. I believe a new one will be reconfigured in the next 18 months to 2 years on the basis of all the splits and splitting which has gone on at the present time. I believe that a new political party is the way forward, but our own people won't vote for it. Not in sufficient numbers, because they're afraid, and because they're in a funk, and because they would like something to happen, but are frightened of the consequences, and think that even to mention these things isn't nice. Only a vanguard can mention these sorts of issues, because only a vanguard is unafraid to deal with the thought of not being nice. These ideas afflict and paralyze our people to a degree which is quite extraordinary. Probably, viewed systematically, more pressure has to be put for there to be more of a radical response. Such pressure is always possible. Economic collapse is always possible. New wars and disturbances are always possible. But one thing we may have to get used to is the idea that as a group and as an ethnicity, we exist in Europe and North America and Australasia and also all over the world. There are plenty of other groups who see themselves as transnational groups, who see their destiny all over the world. They see their destiny in vanguard terms. They see their destiny as having a core group within their own selves that can come back from anything, genetically and in other ways. Not only do they ask the question when it is asked of them, is it good for me or is it bad for me or my group, they also are prepared to cleave to their own group in times of trouble. Certain ethnicities have preserved themselves 67% genetically and more since the ancient world. And they've done so by a culture of coherence and identity which crosses national borders and which understands that if a group is to survive, it may need to adopt some radical measures which involve rolling with the blows. English and British people exist all over the world. We exist all over the world, all over Europe, all over North America, all over Australasia, in quite a few of the countries of Latin America, in most of the ex-colonies. English is the language of the world. It's the lingua franca of modernity or post-modernity. We have given the world a great lot, and this is just to refract our own identity through the national consciousness of one particular people who are actually a part of it. So I think the worst thing that can be uttered at this time is despair. Because there are more than enough of us to provide the vanguard which is necessary. The trick is to link the vanguard to the popular will and to find a way to link the vanguard to the popular will. So
you could say that's something that's sort of now happened with the advent of Twitter, now X, that what he's calling the vanguard has been linked to the popular will in the way we were saying earlier, when people like Elon Musk are suddenly tweeting about it and policy suddenly has to be adopted by even the likes of Reform, the fairly mild parties. Then that might be something that's happened now to a degree that he probably, well, maybe Bowden could imagine it, probably not many people could imagine in 2011. And just to answer Hugh, yes, he was a Nietzsche. Hugh says that he sounds Nietzschean. He doesn't know much about him, but he sounds Nietzsche. He was a Nietzschean indeed. Yes, he describes himself as a Nietzschean, pagan Nietzschean.
Someone also asked what drug he took. It was risperidone, That is the name of the antipsychotic that he took. But yeah, I agree. I was about to ask you to pause, actually, interestingly, at this exact point. Twitter was kind of in its infancy a little bit in 2011, wasn't it? I certainly don't think I was on there.
No, because I think it didn't achieve, what's it called? Mainstream what's that thing called? Saturation, where a majority use it or whatever. That I think is around 2012 for social media.
Yeah, but Facebook first. Twitter emerged later. I don't think even at this time, if I remember correctly, in 2011, they were reporting in newspaper articles about so and so said this on Twitter, so and so said this on Twitter. No. It was just kind of an aside.
I'm quite a late adopter. Right. I only got a smartphone in 2012 myself. So.
Oh, I got one later than that.
Right.
I think about 2016. But yeah, yeah. So I got a mobile in '99 though, when I went to university. Did you have a mobile at university, Nick? Nick? Nick's not talking
again.
Yeah. Did you have a mobile?
Sorry, we just lost internet. This never happened to me on here before today. I don't know why it's chosen today. So sorry, what were you saying?
Did you have a mobile when you started at university?
Yeah, just the Nokia 3210.
1/3 of people on my corridor didn't have one. Well, that was probably the year before you, though. But yeah, it's reached saturation, so it has made that connection. But it's only done so once it's been taken over by somebody that's in touch with the popular will. So it's more that you have to have an individual who is unassailable, who is very, very rich, and so who basically can't be attacked because he's just so rich. And I guess that's always been, even like Jean-Marie Le Pen, the reason that he could advance his political career even in the 50s or 60s was because he had funders that made him so wealthy he could just do what he wanted. So I think it's more that, really, isn't it? It's just that it's the fact that you have people within the elite that have realized that woke is going nowhere, and indeed woke is damaging, and we need to get rid of it. I don't know if Bowden never talked about that idea. He may have done.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, Trump, of course, famously got into the race in 2015-16 and was like, I don't need their money. I've given them more money in the past. They need my money. I don't need them. That was a big deal. And of course, Musk doesn't need anyone's money, being the richest man in the world. Saying my connection's unstable again, which is absolutely crazy. It's never happened before, so hopefully it will be all right. But I don't know why it's chosen today.
Is my son upstairs playing on Minecraft interfering with your connection? Because
I think it must be, because I live in like the atomized life in like a new build flat with incredible internet speed. It's just brutally fast, and I mock everyone who doesn't have brutally fast internet speed. Yet today it's chosen to totally do it, even ruin the video I was doing on my own earlier. So I don't know why it's chosen today. The only other thing I was going to say was he talked a little bit about the rampant sort of global movement of money. You don't hear loads about that on the right these days. Steve Bannon does talk about it. That was the whole premise of economic nationalism, the movement behind Trump. You hear about the left finally, like even Clive Lewis and ridiculous people like this talking about how the free market's got out of control and destroyed communities. You don't really I don't hear about it that much on the right, but people like the SDP do talk about it, and Nick Timothy and people. But that's just sort of something that Bowden touched on there in his serious mode that he's in for this speech. He doesn't talk much about that as far as I know. Dixie can no longer snub guests for having crap internet. It's true. Someone's saying Nick is a bug man. Also true. Should we carry on, Ed, and try and watch the rest in silence?
But organisationally, in the post-Second World War world, there has been a failure to link the vanguard to the popular will. And that has occurred in all the societies of Western and Central Europe, and has occurred even in the post-communist Eastern European societies, where it did appear that such a thing was on the cards immediately after communism collapsed. It's also true to say that communism inoculated these populations against the worst and the most noxious forms of liberalism. The new right thinker Tomislav Stunic, who lived under communism and was imprisoned by it in Croatia with other members of his family, once said that communism rots the body, but liberalism rots the soul. And there's a strong degree of truth to that remark, because liberalism attacks on the internal front, on the front of values and identity. It's why the majority of our people refute their vanguardistic yearnings and callings. Most people, particularly teenage boys, have a sort of yearning for vanguardism when they're early in life. And then they forget it as they get older, and it becomes smeared and smudged over by various forms of liberal orthodoxy. They start either not voting, or they vote for one of the prescribed parties: Conservative and Unionist, Liberal Democrat, Labour. As long as you remain in that area, you're pretty safe in this country, job-wise, career-wise, matrimonially-wise, in terms of reputation, in terms of bourgeois reputation in particular. If you step outside of those boundaries, and it's quite a wide boundary, liberals would say, look, we've given you as wide a space as almost anywhere in the world where you can cavort and make hay and make political pronouncements. Why do you need to go outside that? Why do you need to go out into these extremist and unheralded furrows and sort of support things which are countercultural and anti-system? And the reason that one would choose to do so is because they're not in the interests of the group from which one originates. That's the only reason that one would choose to do so. The only reason for vanguardism is for the elite to protect the mass and seek to bring it forward in history, because the mass can never act for itself. In Orwell's novel, 1984, which I mentioned at the end, Winston and Julia fail in their rebellion, feeble though it was, against the all-powerful party. And Orwell wants them to be seen to fail at the end of the novel. But hope lies in the proles, if you remember. Hope lies in the landlady, in the thick-set woman with the laundry basket who's singing a song. It was only a hopeless fancy. Do you remember that? It was only a hopeless fancy. As she puts the diapers on the line, she's singing It Was Only a Hopeless Fancy, which is a prole feed song given to them by the Ministry of Propaganda in that particular society. My view is that the future always lies with the elite, not with the mass. The future lies with those that will mould the mass and that will prepare for its energisation when a moment comes. That's why my message is one not of despair, but of hope for the future. Because as long as indigenous, nationally conscious, ethnically aware, racially aware, inegalitarian, elitist, and other values and views are put forward in a coherent way, in a sane way, and in an educated way, because that's what people expect views to be put forward in such a way. As long as that happens, there is always hope for the future, because people will align in extremis with their own defence mechanism, and they will align with the people who have put forward the defensive barrister's case, which can become offensive as well as defensive in a particular political and social moment. My view is that as long as there is a continuous effort to put forward the elitist agenda of our own group, in the sense that a proportion of people are prepared to place upon their own shoulders the burden of the moral leadership of their own group. That's what the Black Muslims do.
Oliver Stone on camera work, by the way.
What the Black Muslims in the United States do is they put themselves forward in the most radical way possible. The bulk of American blacks have no interest in Islam at all, and are Christian, and often deeply so, and will only vote for Christian politicians. Yet their most radical vanguard group has adopted Islam, and they've done so because in their own way of looking at things, they consider it to be a less white, a less Western formulation, which is more in keeping with their own sense of their own self, their own strength, their own determinacy. The similar phenomenon can be found amongst so-called white extremists, where many evince pagan and other views, because they basically want a viewpoint which, from their point of view, is totally cardinal and it relates to themselves and to no one else. But that's fine, because all those views do is they sustain the strength of the vanguard. That's why people adopt radical metaphysical views, about which many people in this room would argue amongst themselves. But that's not the point. They're the fuel, they're the food, they're the element that keeps people staunch. Because it's difficult amongst the withering condescension of a liberal society to maintain elitist identity politics. It's not straightforward. It's not easy. and therefore you need to draw upon certain strengths which are theoretical and which are metaphysical and which are emotional as much as anything else, because one's tied to one's own group has an emotional core, just as one's tied to one's own regiment. If one's a soldier, has an emotional core. That emotional core is extremely important. The theories are there for the upper part of consciousness and the upper part of the mind. They're also to keep people supple, and to keep people clever, and to keep people alert. Because if there is such a crisis that our people feel they cannot survive, they will turn to not us, but to people like us. They always have, and they always will. The crisis in our own hearts and minds is the addiction of our people to liberal answers whilst they remain in zones of economic comfort. That is the problem. Now, of course, there's all sorts of our people who are not in zones of economic comfort at all. But the problem is,
it's as though the cameraman is thinking to himself, this Bowden speech is not as exciting as usual, so I'll go back and I'll film all the bald men that we have in the audience. We have a lot of bald men in the audience, a sign of our high testosterone, really, as a group, that our men are so bald in every case, apart from that woman there, but she's a woman with the pink jumper.
There's something funny about it. He's talking about this Vanguard and all those things, and then you cut back to basically old blokes in fleeces.
Yeah,
it's a funny cut. Yeah,
it's the exact point. He needs to illustrate his point of what a vanguard they are with that level of male pattern baldness. And
this is who we mean.
Yeah.
It could be gardening, or they could be vanguarding. Don't know where that came from. You know what, Ed? Speaking of testosterone, he also mentioned that teenagers have kind of fairly sort of vanguard views when they're younger. That's probably testosterone as well, isn't it? Young men, and we still see it today. Young men are sort of much further right than, of course, young women and older men. So that's an interesting thing. Younger men have more, well, they certainly have extreme left views as well. So they tend to be more extreme. I don't know. Have you done any studies on that?
Yeah, there is stuff on this. Their testosterone is associated with low agreeableness and low conscientiousness, and so it's associated with non-conformity. And I suppose that can happen in two directions, depending on who you're dealing with. One, it can happen in an extreme right direction. In particular, in a left-wing society, you'd expect it to happen in the right-wing direction, to rebel against what you're presented with. And the other is that it would happen in a left-wing direction that was just so angry and militant and resentful, which could also to some extent be associated with testosterone, but probably less. I think there's I think it was, oh God, I can't remember the name of the hormone, but it's like not oxytocin. There's another one, and that's a big part of being rebellious as well. But I forget the name of the hormone off the top of my head. But it's sort of a love hormone, but a love hormone for your group. I forget the name. Right. It'll come to me. But yeah, testosterone would kind of do that. And on average, I don't know how big the effect size is. Blokes that go bald often have higher T.
You've also got the kid rebelling against, as we've seen horrifically recently, the kid rebelling against conservative parents. That confuses it a bit again. But the other thing I was going to say was he definitely goes into a bit of elite theory there, doesn't he? Talks about like an elite group molding the masses, and that's all you need is a few people. He says more on this later. So pure elite theory there for fans of that kind of thing in the chat. I'm so put off by my internet problems and the Oliver Stone camera work that I'm slightly thrown. But I think that this is probably the best version of this one because the sound was weird on the other one. Anything else to say, Ed, or should we?
Dopamine is the group bonding, the group bonding but out group hating kind of hormone. That's also relevant to teenagers. They're flooded with these things. So you'd expect to. I mean, that's what we're seeing at the moment, aren't we? I mean, we're both born about the same time, 1980, 81, whatever you are, 82, and the Witan and all these people that are young enough to be our children, embarrassingly, there is this clear rebellious right wing. It's cool to be right wing. It's edgy to be right wing kind of movement, which is mainly male, and which, although increasingly female, as they want to sort of get in there early to get the best right wing cock.
That's called the ovary window. I invented that
ovary window. Yeah, the ovary window.
When women recognize, oh, it's moving, I better not be a shitlib anymore. And then they change. We saw Susanna Reid even do it live on TV. Ovary window. Folks, it's called the ovary window. Sorry.
The ovary window is shifting, girls.
Yeah, exactly. And we see it in all countries. Men are going one way, women are going the other. But they will eventually, if the men hold out, the women will shift. And that's the iron law of the ovary window, which I just invented the other day. All right, should we crack on? And I like that we're getting through this one much quicker than other ones by not talking. That's the genius. Just watching Bowden silently.
But many of them are so degraded by the consequences of life and exist day to day, they have no concern with more general and with more theoretical and with sociological changes. They're concerned with this, this luncheon voucher, this meal tomorrow, this visit to the NHS. They're concerned with what is fundamentally before them at any particular time. The people who always want in a society are the ones who have something to lose, and the ones who are feeling that they're losing it. These enormous middle that extends from the middle of the middle class to the middle of the working class, essentially, the heart of the society. Those are the people who have enough of a stake that they're frightened to lose it. At the moment, they cleave to liberalism because they feel things are not irretrievably and atrociously so bad that they need to call upon elites or vanguards or forms of identity politics to save them. It's our job to keep pushing the message that they need to turn to their more radical proponents in order to be saved. And all that really can be done at this time is to continue to push that message. Organisations will come and go, but ideas remain, if not eternal, then semi-eternal. And all that we have to do is to keep pushing the message of our own self-belief, of our own form of identity, of our own unique position in history, of our own unique cultural achievements, of the barriers that exist to our own advancement, which are in ourselves. Although individuals could be harmed by other groups, the real cause of harm to ourselves is ourselves. Our own queasiness, our own moderation, our own love of reasonableness, our own love of seeing the other man's point of view. All the political correctness is, in some respects, is a growing out of Protestant/liberal apologetics, that we want to hear the other man's point of view, that we don't wish to be rude, that we don't wish to be unfair, that we don't wish to be insulting. And these things have been erected into a big engine, into a big destructive virus that can be used against us to such a degree now that people fear. People fear opening their own mouths. Everything can be said. Everything can be said, but it can only be said at an abstract and intellectual level. Because if you say things at a more guttural or a more primal or a more unindividuated level, you'll be arrested immediately.
Yeah,
this is the acts which
this is a very good. This is a very good point. You can say in academic papers that there are group differences in certain psychological traits, and that's fine. That seems to be no problem for the regime. In fact, my understanding is there's even a get-out clause that you are saying something in an academic context. But if you are too injudicious in the way in which you express it, if you don't express it in a purely academic way, if you express it in a slightly mocking way or a slightly populist sort of manner, then that often has been. I don't know if the prosecutions or whatever have been successful, but it seems to be enough for the police to kind of look into you. And even in Finland, there was a case of a guy, this is 2004 or something, Tatu Vanhanen, and he simply repeated to a newspaper what he had found in an academic book, and the police declared they were going to look into whether he should be prosecuted for saying that. And in the end, he wasn't. And that was if you think back then, it was the repression was so much lower in a way. The feeling that you can't say anything was so much lower than it is, I think, now. Even that was true. Maybe now even academics wouldn't say these things. Like I've been told. Yeah, sorry.
We have a far more aggressive cancel culture now because we have Twitter. but we sort of have more of both, don't we? We also have more Bowden-esque opinions being incredibly mainstreamed or getting massive likes or something, but we have more of both. I'm just thinking out loud, but we have more of you can be cancelled much more, but you can also say a lot more. It's kind of everything's more high stakes in a way.
Well, I suppose you can be cancelled much more, but also there's a greater polarization. So
Right.
there's more people that will kind of back you up. So if you are cancelled, there are places to go, to various kinds of places to go, various alternatives that were not there then. So there's probably an optimum time where if you're cancelled, let's say you're cancelled in, I don't know, 2018, then you're absolutely screwed, or 2017. But if you're cancelled now, it's not so bad because there's a whole alternative society that seems to have developed that may well take you in.
Yeah, and when you first got cancelled, there wasn't even a name for it, and it was called public shaming. And John Ronson, of course, wrote, "So you've been publicly shamed." Later, he got into saying cancel culture was good, but there was that Justine Sacco woman. She wasn't even political. She just did one bad taste joke, and then by the time her plane had landed, she was completely cancelled from her job and everything. She was almost like the archetypal example.
Or James Watson in 2007. I've just done a book on him, by the way, called the Genius Under House Arrest: The Cancellation of James Watson, and exactly him. So there wasn't a word for what happened to him, but he was just cancelled in 2007. Everything was taken away from him for just a few remarks that he made in an interview.
Yeah, there was another scientist. I don't think it was him. There was another scientist, wasn't there, who said a few remarks in an interview, and I can't remember who was that. I can't remember who it was now, but I remember he actually came into. I think he came into the bookshop I was working and actually bought a book on it and said, I think he bought "So You've Been Publicly Shamed" and said, "This is what's happened to me." And he was actually trying to read the book and figure it out. Can't remember who that was now, but there were a lot of those kind of cancellations around.
Well, was this in Newcastle?
No, in London. It just half came to me this anecdote, but I remember from about 2000. When did that book come out? "So You've Been Publicly Shamed," just so I don't get my dates. So I might be mixing my dates.
Oh, yeah. I know there was a guy that was a lecturer, I think, Imperial College London.
That was published 2015, so I've mixed my dates all together. So, yeah, go on.
That might fit, actually. There was a guy at Imperial College London, and he made some remarks about women and how if you debate them, they start crying or something like this.
Yeah.
Which is factually true. And then there was a woman called Jess Wade who also tried to cancel me. I mean, went to Ola University and tried to have me stripped of an academic qualification that I have, which of course they couldn't do. But in the end, they just took my name off the website. Called Jess Wade, that's her name. And she was the one that wrote about him and how terrible he was. And I think that's the controversy. I think he was a physicist at Imperial College, I think.
I was thinking of Tim Hunt. So
Tim
Hunt
that sounds right. That sounds right.
From university over a girl's comment.
Yeah,
that's it. Women cry when they're criticized and fall in love with male counterparts.
Right. Yeah, this is it. This is the guy.
So that was 2015, and that was the same year that book was published. The only random bit I threw in was the bookshop. I wasn't working in a bookshop. I worked there in 2007, so I don't know where that came from. But this was the time period. 2015, very tough to get cancelled. Now you can just go on Edge Show and rake in the cash. But these were different times. Yeah, and there was something else I've forgotten I was going to say. Never mind. We'll crack on. Unless you got anything else you were going to add, Ed. I think.
Oh no, I've got a few things I could say at the end, but there's nothing.
Okay. Oh yeah, the other thing I was going to quickly add was it's also random now who gets cancelled. You've got your regime obviously cancelling its enemies, like the girl who just said "kill them all" in her TikTok about conservatives. Police are like, "Nah, we looked into it. That's fine, actually. She won't go to prison like Lucy Connolly." So of course you've got your regime thing. Then you also have other times where you're just like, why is that one arrestable and that one isn't? And sometimes there really seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. But as we've said, yes, some of it can be whether it's academic. Though I believe Nathan Koffner's still got in a lot of trouble. So you can.
He didn't get in legal trouble though. He didn't get in legal trouble.
Right. Interesting distinction. Okay.
But put things at a high enough level. If you put them at the level of a university right-wing seminar, basically, no one can touch you. No one can touch you on earth, irrespective of all the laws that have been passed. The only exception would be some of the revisionist legislation in Europe in relation to particular statements, and that applies just to certain European nation states and not others. But broadly speaking, you cannot be touched. But this means you're talking at an abstract level that alienates you even further from the masses, and which is done deliberately for that effect. But also remember that everyone knows that what you're saying, everyone knows what is being said, because things are digested at different levels. And people absorb things sensually, intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, through the hands, through the heart, through the eye, through the fist. They sense it and hear it at different levels. And everybody understands what is being said, even if it's implicit. Ours is an implicit group. The English are in part shy and restrained, and even slightly socially awkward. That's why theatre is so important in our history, because it gives an alternative space to be others, and to be exuberant, and to be passionate, and to be bombastic and virile, things which are not seemingly part of the national characteristic as is. But everyone understands what is being said. Everyone understands what is happening in this society. Everyone understands the transformation which is being wrought. And everyone understands, or almost everyone understands, the choices that may have to be made in the future. It's quite clear that at the present time, people are not going to vote for a vanguard party, and there isn't one. But that doesn't mean that a vanguard party shouldn't exist. My view is the vanguard party should exist and will have to be rebuilt for the moment when such a thing may occur. But the real point is the fact that such a vanguard exists. Menachem Begin once said that all he needed was 200 men. For Zionism to be established in Palestine, all he needed was 200 men who were prepared to act selflessly in the national and ethnic cause and in a religious cause, although his movement was not an explicitly religious one. You don't need many people. You don't need, when the politics of mass and individual identity come up, an enormous army of people. What you need is those who have the courage and the will to speak at a particular time, and those who keep the mental continuity of that tradition going over time. Because everyone notices what we say, even if it's kept from the masses. Everyone notices what the politics of identity amounts to. Periodically, there's always a programme on the BBC about the far right of some salacious sort. That's always there. It needs to be there. It's a compulsive need. Why does it need to be there? Because liberals need to scratch. They need to find their opposite half. They need to find their other side, their shadow, their darkness. They need to stare into the pit of darkness. That's what they need. They're loved with this sinister other side that they project onto. In Freudian psychoanalysis, there's the idea of projection. Now, let's not get into whether that's a true theory or not, but it's an interesting idea that people who don't like something about themselves project their own nastiness and their own fear and fervour onto others. And that's in some ways what liberals do with people who have, let's call it nationalistic opinions in Western societies. They're a product of a sort of secular demonisation, aren't they, really? Because the elite that speaks for its own group is treated as the secular equivalent of Satanism, virtually, certainly by many forms of popular media. I mean, that's not an untruthful or particularly biased statement. I think it's just a factual one. Certainly at the level of propaganda, it's a factual one. At the level of academic reporting, it's not, and a more realistic view is taken. But at the level of tabloid media and general media, the demonisation is very strong. The demonisation has worked. The demonisation has worked, which is why people will not vote in enormous numbers for parties of extraordinary reasonableness. All of the populist parties have fallen over themselves to be as moderate and as acclimatising as possible in this era. They've given away almost 70% of the core ultra views that manifest in this particular areas, and yet still people will not vote.
I like the way that I think he's right to some extent about this projection. That is the idea of the scapegoat, the idea that the community puts all the bad things they feel about themselves and all of the sort of cognitive dissonance onto a literal goat and kills it, and then they feel better because they've symbolically killed something bad in themselves. It's very interesting, and it's so strong that I could give an example of scapegoating here that is not what he's talking about, a different one. And I'm certain that my subscribers, a lot of my viewers, would get very angry if I said that was scapegoating. I'm not even going to say it. But they were so, how can you say that? That's ridiculous. Oh my God. Like, they literally would go crazy, which only proves how accurate that idea is, I think.
Okay, yes, you can easily blame everything on a certain group. What came into my mind, of course, now was that the goats are literal. We have literal people carrying goats around in England. Have you noticed that those videos you'll see on X where they actually have an actual goat? That's a very different problem, though. That's to do with different cultures.
Goats are not very good pets, though. I mean, then I used to go out with a girl from Norway who had her parents had a farm, and I visited this farm, and she had a goat called Bertil, and it wasn't a very intelligent person. It really wasn't. It was much less intelligent than a dog. Or
but you called it a person, so it must be quite intelligent to reach that level.
I'm happy to ascribe Bertil personhood, but I just think Bertil just wasn't that bright. He had to. What was it? There was some instinctive thing he had to do where you either you had to leave the room ahead of him or you had to leave the room behind him. I forget which it was, and it was some instinctive herd animal behavior. They're not very bright. I also had some very tasty goats in a restaurant in Handsworth in Birmingham, a Jamaican restaurant.
And now we have we have UK goats, don't we? Now, like UYOOKAY, the UK urban goat you'll just see in a garden or on someone carrying it along a roundabout or something. This is the world now. But it's a good point about the scapegoat. I've forgotten what I was going to say because your point was too powerful, Ed. And I slightly need the loo, but I think we should probably try and finish, don't we? How long has it got left in it? I think we could probably. It's like 6 minutes.
Put it back on, and then go to the loo while I'm watching.
And you just tell me what it says. When it comes back. Okay.
I'll do that.
Both of them in a majority way, and that is because the demonisation, together with the apathy and the attendant liberalism, have all worked. But demonisation has a point of crescendo. Demonisation builds and builds and builds until it gets so out of kilter with reality that people shrug it aside as if it's of no importance. And then it can be a form of virility, and it can be a form of power, and it can be a form of importance. In Northern Ireland at the moment, the Catholic group is proud to vote for almost everybody. The moderate nationalist party, nationalist in the context of that particular society, don't forget, is dying. The SDLP is an elderly party of trade union activists, which is dying. And there is a degree to which we have to understand that in our politics, all is open and anything can happen. And the future is ours if we want it to be. And that the point of the elitist view that I'm putting forward is that the absence of despair is always necessary for our way of thinking and our way of looking at things. I ask you not to despair. I ask you to look to the future as to the present and to the past. I ask you to remain faith with vanguardistic and elitist views. I ask you to remain faithful to unpopular views at the present time, because they will become majority views instantaneously at a particular moment if the society should ever break and turn our way. All that can be done is to sustain ideas. One man alone in a room with a computer, a typewriter as was, can change the world. A few people alone in a room, if they cleave to an idea whose time has come, can still change the world. There are more of us than ever before. Our people are probably dumbed down to an incredible degree, but more are capable of being better educated than ever before. We're stronger and fitter than ever before.
No.
In the Boer War, when the slums of England were opened, 2/3 of those that came forward were raddled with rickets and with disease and couldn't fight and wouldn't fight because they physically couldn't fight. Churchill once said, "What's use having an empire if you can't flush your own toilet?" One of his rare radical social statements. And there's a degree of truth in all of that. So I would ask the people in this room to understand that they're part of a tradition of non-surrender, a tradition of ultimate resource, a tradition that never says die, a tradition that's the epitome of military life but in another area, theoretically and politically and actuarially. One can never take one's identity from one. One exists for a purpose. Liberals believe life has no purpose. But life has a purpose, and life's purpose is to go forward and to confront that which is before you. And what is before us is cultural dispossession, unless we're prepared to do something about it. What we can do about it will depend upon the circumstances. But what we can do is to remain loyal to our own sense of identity, to our own sense of becoming, to our own sense of what we may be in the future. Most people are truly afraid. They are afraid to open their own mouths in relation to any of these issues. We must not be. We must understand that that degree of fear needs to be conquered in ourselves, as it will be conquered in others. Only when the time comes will we be looked to, if we remain loyal to our vision of ourselves. We know who we are. We don't know yet where we are going, but we will always exist. And we must always maximize the maximum potential of our existence. There's a book on the side of this room called March of the Titans, which in its way hopes to adumbrate all that we have achieved. Our quadrant of mankind has achieved an enormous amount through elite individuals who replicate back onto the majority the success of their own group in architecture, in law, in art, in scholasticism, in morals, in economics, in military affairs, in technology, elsewhere. But also in political leadership, also in military courage, also in vanguardism and elitism. The present political class has betrayed us. But that doesn't mean the political classes can be done away with. It just means they need to be replaced with people who are better and stronger and more willful and more in tune with the internal vibrations and sense of solemnity of their own group. I ask you to put your hands together for Britain, for Europe, for Indo-European civilization, for our notion of ourselves, and for an undying and unquenchable fire that can never be put out because it never knows what it is to be extinguished. Thank you very much.
That is what I used to say at the end of all my stand-up comedy gigs.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, no, the bit before it. I want you to put your hands together for, and then just a long list. And I'd usually get kicked out. All right, that is pretty much it. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Ed, do you have? You mentioned you have some closing. Oh no, I've got to do the super chats, then closing comments. So thank you to Nigel for the super sticker. No comment, just money, which is a perfect thing. Lady Sarcastro, who and/or what do you gentlemen believe our current vanguards are? Do you have any comment, Ed, on who the current vanguards are?
Well, I mean, modesty doesn't permit me to.
He means himself.
I'm at Nick. Well, I suppose in terms of those that are getting the most prominence, Curtis Yarvin has done it in his. But then, to be fair, if you really were the vanguard, would you be allowed to debate Alistair Campbell, who is utterly the establishment? Doesn't that imply you might, yeah, but also
it's all changing in the way that Bowden says. Yeah, I mean, you've got people like Fuentes, you've got those kind of people. It depends what you mean by it, isn't it? Because if it means the real vanguard type people, you would say the kind of Fuentes people, the online right and so on. But then you could look at it and say, he's talked about a lot about quasi-elite theory type things there. So you could say the vanguard is like Bannon and the Trump movement or something, couldn't you? And Tucker Carlson or something. But perhaps that's more of a counter-elite than a vanguard. What do you? Any further thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know what's the difference between a counter-elite and a vanguard. Shouldn't a vanguard try to position itself as the counter-elite?
Yeah, it should. I see it as something prior to that. I'm completely making this up, but I just see if you're looking at Bowden in a room with blokes with fleeces, that's the vanguard. But then by the time it's reached, I don't know. It's the vanguard. Someone like Fuentes and all these kind of people, they sort of influence the Overton window, but they don't actually take over themselves, do they? So I don't know what the difference is between those. Fiddlestick says Curtis Yarvin isn't a vanguard. He's on Peter Thiel. Oh, I'm not sure I can say that because I was about to read out something defamatory about old Curtis. But You and your mates, Fiddlesticks says. Yeah, I think it's Ed. I think Ed's the main vanguard. Principled uncertainty with the massive super chat. Great to see Ed on the show. Stop drinking Diet Coke. Well, you sound like my dentist. But the problem is I've also quit sugar. So there's absolutely no joy left in life now. There's just nothing. It's just grim. I'm not eating sugar. I'm not meant to drink Diet Coke. So it's like, what is there? What else is there?
Meat, alcohol.
I don't drink either. So you can see the problem. I don't drink tea or coffee. Just me drinking water while talking to Ed Dutton as my only.
We had fish and chips. We had fish and chips that time. Do you enjoy fish and chips?
That was good. Yeah, that was good. That was quite a good fish and chips.
That was good. You had piles of potatoes on the floor. I liked that.
It was authentic, although they were. I mean, it doesn't matter, but yeah, it was authentic. Ed, any closing remarks? That's all the super chats, sadly. I'll give you a couple of quid. Any closing remarks?
They weren't British. No, they weren't. But they were pleasant enough, and I liked their fish and chip shop. Any closing remarks? Well, one thing that's interesting that people have said is that oh God, if Bowden was around today, he'd be massive. He'd be. I don't know. The thing is, if he was massive, there'd be a lot of scrutiny of him. And it wouldn't be by someone that likes him, like that is kind of sympathetic to him, like me. It would be scrutiny by people that don't like him, and they would have a field day. So if he was alive and became really famous, not sure.
The papers would have something to say about his made-up children.
They would. His made-up children that his friends gave presents to, his made-up wife, his made-up businesses. They'd have something to say. I mean, it would kind of make Jeffrey Archer look honest. So
yeah. I was just going to say 2011 was probably the last time you could have an entirely made-up life.
Yeah, the internet wasn't detailed enough yet for you to be able to, for your made-up life to come crashing down. But I mean, the simple checking of the Mormon website where it has births, deaths, and marriages would tell you that he wasn't married and didn't have any children. So it would be very quick. Unfortunately, but that's what I said earlier about madness. Great wits close to madness lies.
Yes,
Bowden obviously had great wits in the sense of being witty and funny. Not so much in this speech, but in other speeches.
In other speeches, we refused to watch. We wanted to watch the most grim one, but it's still a good speech. But the counter to your point, Ed, is that when he says at the end there, minority views can become the majority very suddenly or instantly, whatever, instantaneously. That has sort of happened. I mean, I hate to repeat myself, but that has kind of happened. Although Bowden himself might have a bad broadsheet profile, the mad nutter far right guy's made up family would be the headline. But his ideas certainly have suddenly become instantaneously semi-normal. Or
that is some of them, yeah. So that is true. He's like what Nietzsche said. Some men are born posthumously. I think I quoted that in my book, Shaming of the Radical Right: The Life and Mind of Jonathan Bowden, which I stress to critics does say that it looks at the life and mind. Does say that. Mind. It's not just life. Yeah. So I think that's true. I made some other notes. Colin Sweeney said something about your wee. About your 6-minute wee, which wasn't.
Did you really have to note that down? Well, it didn't take me 6 minutes. But actually, I realized I can listen on. I've done this before for the AA streams. I can listen on my phone while I go for a wee, so I don't actually miss any of the speech. It's quite a surreal feeling because we do these 3-hour streams with Academic Agent, and most of it I'm not in the room. I mean, but luckily we had the cameras off for those, so I could just be not in the room listening to myself. But I'm not speaking. Other people are, and I'm technically there, but I'm also not there. It's quite strange.
I think it was a respectable length of wee. I mean, like much shorter, and you might suspect it was maybe urinary tract infection or something like that, But it was a respectable wee length. I don't think anybody needs to be concerned about that, Mr. Sweeney.
Colin also says you only need 200 people. Find your 200, Nick. I'll have you know we've got more than that watching right now, and I'm up to a blistering 22,000 subscribers. Nothing compared to Ed, but my Substack actually has almost 700 paid subscribers. So I think we're doing all right. I think that's more than a vanguard. It's way more than Bowden had in that room. Probably shouldn't say these exact numbers. We'll edit this out. Go on, Ed.
Yeah, you shouldn't say the exact numbers. That might cause I hate to go for you. But I also like the way that the sense of voice. I remember you commenting with regard to my Bowden book that I use the word aver too much, which is a word of which I'm fond.
I did aver that. But you hadn't edited it. I mean, it doesn't even have an index. I was trying to find Vanguardism, but I got the early one with no index and just a ver used.
Well, you have to blame the Spectator for that, because they made it clear to me that there was going to be an article about my book on a certain date, and so we had to get it out and thus get it on Amazon before that date. So that was that. So that's why there's a new version now where the word aver has been replaced by various synonyms for it.
My copy is called Aver: the life and mind of Jonathan Bowden.
Yes,
like, doesn't make any sense.
He has. He has certain words that he's fond of, though, doesn't he? Like that he uses a number of times, like cardinal. He likes that word. He's into that word. And funk, he used that 3 times. And germane. And then adumbrate is a word you don't hear very much either.
True, you don't.
So
hear that
much. he liked chucking in the old obscure words. And
I'm not that big on Bowden words right now, because when I was interviewing you about your book, and everyone should listen to that episode as well, please, or not please, but if you want, I was watching all the speech and I was really into it. I haven't actually thought about him for quite a while now, so I've forgotten all his kind of buzzwords, but he does have certain recurring words. Anyway, sorry, go on, Ed.
Any novelist that's creating a character will give them a sense of voice and give them phrases that they use, won't they? And you get it a lot in comedy. Obviously, things like Reggie Perrin going, "Oh my God," or CJ, "I didn't get where I am today," or whatever. People do have those, or a lot of people anyway, do tend to have those buzzwords, and then all those terms they like a lot, and then they are. It is lampooned. It is exaggerated in comedic characters, and they have catchphrases. But yeah, he certainly had his catchphrase. Of course, he would end the speech always by saying "Thank you very much" as well.
I know, but that's not like particularly innovative, is it? Thank you very much.
No,
I mean, it's a strange catchphrase to have at the end of a speech. It's just loads of people say that.
Well, you need to. If your speech hasn't risen to a clear climax such that everyone starts clapping, then
you say it. Thank you very much, and then they have to clap.
And then you have an indicator that it's time to clap.
I said it. One of my Lotus Eaters segments ended quite abruptly the other day, and I didn't know what to say, so I just said "Thank you very much." And Harry thought that was like ridiculous and weird and awkward. I was like, I thought it was perfectly fine. It's a good ending. Thank you very much.
You've got to have something. You're performing for these people. You're performing for them. You're just a performer.
Oh yeah. Hi ho Kermit says Dixie likes anarcho tyranny. We have a drink when he utters it. Yeah, anarcho tyranny is my famous one that I say a lot. You have aver and hello said 3 times. That's yours.
Then maybe I quite like the word germane. I have to say I do. I am something of a fan of the word germane. I also like the way that people in the audience must have been remembering, because this is called Vanguardism, and there was a book in 1999 that was edited by Jonathan Bowden and others called Vanguard, and Bowden just basically couldn't be bothered to write his article for it, so he just found an interview in a magazine with this guy called Bill Hopkins, who was this novelist he liked, and then he just plagiarized the interview, and then it was republished in the magazine. That's the kind of thing he'd do. He was a bit crazy. Some people that came on here tonight said they'd never heard of him. So, let's plow on is apparently a Nick phrase. Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, I've started to say that I say let's plow on in the stream. I don't know why I say that, but what else can you say? Let's resume.
You're northern and you're from the countryside.
Let's plow on. Yeah, so I'm used to a lot of plowing. That's what I grew up doing.
There would have been plows. There would have been. Yeah. That's probably what your parents did. Probably farmers.
Sometimes I say, "Allow me to make some progress," but that's when I'm pretending to be Enoch Powell. He always. Everyone says that when they're trying to make some progress with their speech. I will not give way. I will make some progress. That's the other thing you can say. Yeah, Ed has spiteful mutants as well. He does. Actually,
I do have that. But I went to his house earlier in the month. Enoch Powell's childhood house.
Did you? Did he? Anyone know about it, or you just?
No, I filmed it. We filmed it. But okay. I went to Enoch Powell related place. I was in Birmingham anyway, and so I thought, why not do a little Enoch Powell pilgrimage? So I went to the house he was born at, but that had all been pulled down and it was all new. So that's not there anymore. And then there's this childhood house, which is quite nice. That's not very big, but quite nice detached house in a quite nice area. And then I went to the school that he went to, and then I went to which was this sort of King's Norton Grammar School, it used to be called. Now it's called something a bit different. And that was fine. And we walked onto the grounds and there was some Karen, clearly, with a lanyard. And I said to my cameraman, well, film me. And then hopefully this Karen will throw us out and it will make good footage. And so he starts filming me, and Karen couldn't care less. She could not care less. And she just walked past, whatever.
It's like, get annoyed with me, say normie things, cancel me.
Get out, come on, chuck me out, tell me I'm on private property, ask me why I'm filming, anything. And she did nothing. And so then we went to the King Edward VI Grammar School, which is where he went next, and was this private school to which he got a scholarship. And so I thought, which is opposite the University of Birmingham headquarters. And I thought, well, we'll be fine. So let's go and find a good shot. Very beautiful building, you know. Let's go and find a good shot. Let's line me up. My cameraman wasn't filming. And then this woman comes, excuse me, can I ask what you're doing, please? Yeah, I'm so-and-so Bullock. I'm in charge of comms. I'm head of comms. Fuck that means. And we had to come up with some excuse as to what we were doing. Obviously, we couldn't say we're filming about, Pal, your school's most famous pupil, because the images on the school were images of Chinese kids and whatever. So we didn't think that was a very good idea. So I basically just went into finish, and my cameraman pretended to understand. And then we politely said goodbye and got into the car, and then just filmed from the car. But that was it. You always got to be. She had a lanyard. It's the new thing that you must have. Teachers did not have lanyards at my school 27 whatever years ago. That was not done.
And
but now,
as soon as you give someone a lanyard, they feel important. This is a universal law. You used to have it at the Edinburgh Comedy Festival. You'd have like certain lanyards to get into certain things. I would embarrassingly not even wear them if I had them, but I'd show them I have to get into certain venues. But that was the big thing, like which lanyards do you have, which passes? People are such wankers. You give them a single bit of plastic around their neck and they think they're Napoleon.
Yeah, exactly. They are worse than Napoleon. Like Keir Starmer or someone like that. Or David Lammy. And then that's it. I have to pay attention to this Karen. I bet her name was Karen. Her surname was certainly Bullock, which was hilarious.
I can't believe she would have fallen for the fact that you're Finnish, because you're the most like English-looking person, I think, probably on the planet.
But the great thing about Finland is that most people outside of Finland know nothing about it. Right. You could go for it. I was actually once with a chap whom we both know, and he was filming me in central London, and we didn't use the footage, but it was with the anti-Brexit campaigners that stand there outside Parliament shouting and stuff, or they used to do so, those kind of people. And I was talking to them, and we pretended to be so that they talked to us. We pretended to be from a Finnish production company, and I spoke in a Finnish accent, and then would say things to him in Finnish occasionally, and he'd say "yo." And then occasionally, eventually, this woman said, "Oh, I can speak some Finnish." And she said to me in Finnish, what was it she said to me? She said, "My name's so and so, and I'm from so and so," or something. And so you can't fake it. You got to actually speak Finnish. If you go around faking it, you may find someone that can speak Finnish, then you'll be in trouble.
Then you're screwed. How good is your Finnish?
Oh, I'm all right. I've done lectures at the university, things like that. So I can get by. I wouldn't say. I mean, there's certain words I don't know. I can't remember. I can't think of the Finnish word for adumbrate, for example.
What's the Finnish word for a traitor who leaves his country?
Maapetteri, kukka lähtee hänen maasta. Hänen isän maasta.
That's what you are, mate. That's what you are, mate. I sometimes feel like that. But someone said, I said it to someone, I said, Ed's a traitor, and they said, oh, he's got a Finnish family or something. But I still feel of you as a sort of semi-traitor, Ed, no offense.
So is it treason when you're a postgraduate to like start dating a Finnish girl in Scotland? Is that treason?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
What about going to university in Scotland rather than England?
I don't mind it, because I found out I had 1.3% Aberdeenshire in my DNA, so I can give that a pass, actually. I think that's reasonable. So that's all right.
It's okay to go to the University of Aberdeen for your doctorate, but it's not okay to go talking to international students.
No, you can't be talking to any foreign women. I mean, I've been out with foreign women. Obviously, I regret it now bitterly. I can't believe this is still on. This is still on stream. I forgot this is still on stream. I always forget. I get deep into these streams, you can get a bit complacent.
Yeah. Don't repeat that joke you made to me on WhatsApp.
No, I won't. Principled Uncertainty says, when Nick and Ed resent BBC breakfast, then we will have won. Well, we already resent it, but yes, if we present it, which I assume is what you mean there, that will truly be a win. When we're just me and you doing daytime TV, Ed. There's a world.
We know we're being shot, and now we're interviewing the ghost of J. Philip Rushton via a Ouija board. And
now let's go to Enoch Powell's. Ed, I hear you went out and did some field work. You did a report.
I did. I went to Enoch Powell's school, and I got into an argument with a mean lady.
Yeah. And just you doing the Patrick Christie thing, but you're out there roaming, getting attacked by Sandra Bullock or whatever she was called. and you're just going, "We must be literally mad." These were the words of Enoch. Anyway, just imagining me cutting to you.
I would be good at it. I did actually when I was in Birmingham for the Witan. I did actually dress up in like a Muslim. I don't know what you call it, but that long shirt that Muslims or Pakistanis wear. That really long kind of shirt.
It's called the long shirt.
I don't know what it's called. And walked around. And people loved it, and they were beeping their car horns at me and coming up to me and saying respect, and stopping their cars and saying respect. Because I suppose from their perspective, it was kind of me acknowledging in a humorous way that they had successfully taken hold of this particular area, which was called Sparbrook, and Spar Hill. And so as a white man walking around, they really liked it. And they were really, really friendly to me. They were not so friendly to a woman that was at that conference that walked around on her own in that area the previous day, apparently, in Western.
That can happen. That kind of I've heard. They're not always obviously very peaceful and friendly to women. I just forgot we were on this still streaming again. This can feel like just me chatting to you, Ed. So obviously it's not. It's live, so we can't say any of our actual opinions. You can because that's how you live. Anything else, Ed, to round up on old Bowden?
Well, I think we should do it again, but watch a one that's actually funny.
Yeah, the thing is that we could do the Punch and Judy one, but that's just so weird and funny, and there's almost nothing to add to it. It's just like, yes, it's almost imminent. It's self-contained. He's talking about Punch and Judy, but there's nothing else. It's just all that. It's almost like a performance piece that's perfect. So perhaps there's nothing to add, or it could still be good. Then there's other really good ones, but they like Credo is a good one, but it has no visuals. So
it has to have a visual because the viewers are childlike and they can't just use their imaginations. That's true. Although to be fair, though, young people do like audio books, don't they?
It depends how obscure people want to go. They don't want to hear about Ezra Pound or Mishima. Someone in the chat said that Mishima was a good one.
But the Mishima's post schizophrenia. We want pre-schizophrenia.
We want pre-schizophrenia. Yeah, maybe we do Punch and Judy then, just because people haven't seen anything like it if they haven't seen it.
We could do Punch and Judy and do it with a third person. I don't know who that would be.
We could get Simon in. Actually, I felt bad that Simon was in the chat because I thought he wasn't free tonight, or I would have invited him. I thought he was only free Monday and Saturday, so I feel a bit bad about that because he was just in the chat. So we could get Simon, or we could get.
Yeah, I've not met Simon. I've heard all this stuff about this guy Simon. No, great.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, really great.
But the problem with the third person, Ed, though, is it just goes on for ages and ages. Like what I liked about the one today is we just kept it tight, like sure,
that's what I like. Didn't really talk at all. Just watched it.
That's what I love. That's my dream. That's always been the dream. I had a thing on Nima's streams of never pausing it. My rule is I would never pause it, and I just wanted to do.
Well, I think it would have been funnier to not be on camera ourselves. Just not pause it. Just show it.
Just like an AI YouTube account, just repurposing content. We're not even here. We're just passing it off as our own.
No. Yeah. Well, okay, we can ask Simon next time and arrange some day. It could be good to have some beers while doing it, but of course you don't drink. But does Simon drink?
I don't know. We should do. I think he does a little bit. Yeah, we should do some sort of Avengers Assemble ultra based. Me, you, Nima, and Morgoth or someone. Just some sort of ultra. Actually, I don't know when Morgoth was born. He's not as Xennial, but we should do some sort of ultra massive. Who was I thinking? Yeah, something like that. We should bring everyone together for some sort of ultra stream.
We should. I think Morgon's the same age as Nicola Sturgeon.
Right. I don't know him as well, but I'm sure he'd be great. Simon's popped up. It would go on forever if I was there pausing it. That is true. Simon pauses too much. It's all about not pausing at all. I think I've said it before.
It's like Barney from The Simpsons. I drink. I'm a man that drinks. I'm a drinker.
I've said before. I see it as 4:33, like John Cage. It's the silence. It can be whatever the context. It changes each time. It's a silent piece of music. I see my ideal stream as a silent stream where I'm here. So the context is different, but I don't actually speak. You see what I mean?
Yeah. I see. He doesn't like beer, apparently. I don't know why that would be the case. Maybe he's very young. I didn't.
Well, that's something we have in common because I also don't like beer.
You don't like anything.
True.
But I didn't like beer till I was at university in the Netherlands, and gin and tonic, which was my go-to drink, was so expensive there that I was forced to start drinking lager.
Well, I drank a lot of beer as a youngster because you'd have got beaten up when I'm from drinking gin and tonic. That would not have got off the ground. In Cumbria, I can tell you that would not have got past day one.
I think if I had drunk gin and tonic at my great-great-grandfather's house, Thorney Howe in Grasmere, that among those circles it would have been acceptable, but perhaps not.
Yeah, I know Thorney Howe. Is that your great?
That's my great-great-grandfather's house. Yeah, he lives.
There you go. We're probably related, Ed. I've checked my DNA. I didn't say if we were related, but I assume we go back far enough. We're probably brothers.
Well, I'm certainly 12 cousins with Richard Granham, who you may have heard of. I don't. Just randomly discovered that he had a great grandfather that was Dutton, and I do have ancestors that are. Oh no, it's Nixon, isn't it? Is it Nixon, not Dixon? So no, that's not going to work. But I'll have to look into it. I'll have to look into it. Do you have a mother with an obscure maiden name? That'd be the kind of thing that helps.
I can't mention it on the stream because there's a lot of sickos in our chat.
Yeah, I understand that. But is it an obscure maiden name?
No, it's not. It's not.
That doesn't really help me.
It's Northern.
The best thing is, but Northern could be. I mean, Dutton is not an obscure name in Cheshire and Lancashire. It's not obscure.
Oh no, well Dixon, where I come from, is a massive name. So every electrician and plumber is called Dixon. Even though, anyway, it's complicated. Yeah, it's complicated. My family, half from Lincolnshire, half from South Lancashire. The DNA knows all this. It's quite scary how much it knows. And I got 52.2%, something like that, 52.2% northwest, which was great. And then Yorkshire wasn't even part of that, so that was even more north. So it's very good. Very just what I thought. Have you done all this DNA stuff?
I have done the DNA. Yeah, I showed it to you, didn't I? And you were concerned that I was a bit foreign.
I know there was something you cut out. You cut out a little. You'd cropped part of it, and I was like, "What's the bit he's leaving out?"
I think I used a different DNA service from you, and so unfortunately, it didn't show me. I used 23andMe.
No, this was living DNA.
Yeah, and it didn't show me the exact things that your one showed you. But one thing that was weird that did happen to me was there was this accent test you could do online where it would try to identify your accent based on samples of accents that it had. And it identified me as Kingsworthy, which is a village literally next to the suburb of Winchester, where my mother was brought up.
Wow.
So I found that really bizarre. And there must have been certain little pronunciations that I've inherited from her.
That's extraordinary.
That were enough to tell it that I'm from Kingsworthy. Yeah,
because I feel like I've lost my accent, but I bet that machine you're talking about would instantly place it, because we do have an accent in Lakes. It's sort of like that, but I've lost mine a bit. But I bet it would know instantly my exact house.
It would be able to. It would. Well, I don't know. It depends how big the sample is, and I don't know. Did you say your mum wasn't from there?
Well, she was from Lancashire.
Yeah, because one of the things that does happen, and I'm not saying that you're autistic, and you're not, are you really? But one of the things that I was reading was that autistic people are less likely to adopt the local accent, and if their parents aren't from where they're from, they're more likely to maintain their parents' accent, because they're just less socially aware and less socially skilled. So if the parents have I don't know, if their parents are from Birmingham or something and bring them up to speak in a kind of Birmingham-y way when they're very young, then they will keep that, even though they will then go to school and be surrounded by people that speak in the London accent. It's quite a strange thing.
Powell had that interesting retaining part of the Wolverhampton accent, but with mixed with the RP that everyone was supposed to speak. So I ended up with it. We must be literally mad. I always do my impression. People love it.
We must be mad, literally mad. Well, he wasn't from Wolverhampton. He was from Birmingham, as I told you.
Birmingham, yeah. Birmingham. Sorry. Do you know what? I corrected myself mentally because I thought Birmingham, but someone corrected me and said Wolverhampton once, but it was Birmingham, wasn't it?
He was the MP for Wolverhampton.
Yeah. No, you're right. I over corrected myself in my mind there. I knew I was right. Never second, because someone else corrected me and said Wolverhampton, but they were wrong. Okay, good. I haven't finished the book. I've forgotten. I've stopped reading. I need to get back to it. It's a brilliant book. Have you read Heffer's biography?
No, I've got another one.
Incredibly good.
I forget who it's by, but there's another. I've got here. Where is it?
But I haven't finished it because it's very long and books are quite hard to read.
Look at this book I have here. Look at this. Collected poems of Enoch Powell.
You've got all the love poems.
Some of which are a bit J apparently, and he came out to his parents when he was a professor in the University of Sydney as J, and he said, Hang
on.
He did. Yeah.
As what?
As as Ginger.
Right,
And,
right. No, he's not. He's not. You've done this before. You're spreading calumnies about. I just thought in a ridiculous obscure word as well. Probably mispronounced it. But you're lying about Powell because Heffer's very clear in the book that there's nothing gay going on. He just
there's nothing gay going. There's nothing gay going on. But he went through. I guess because in those days at Cambridge there were no women, or if they were, he had nothing to do with them. And he didn't court a woman for the first time until he was about 37.
36. Yeah. Look, he had
36,
we can check later, but he had a sort of idealistic, platonic kind of. He had a kind of ideal of a sort of certain sort of soldier man, but it wasn't. Although he admitted it was love, it wasn't gay love. All right, it was a different kind of Shakespearean love that we can't understand.
So it's like Shakespeare and the Earl of Southampton.
Maybe not Shakespeare, but it was a kind of heroic ideal rather than anything gay.
Well, can I just read this to you? I hate the ugly, hate the old, I hate the lame and weak, but more than all I hate the dead that lie so still in their earthen bed and never dare to rise. I only love the strong and bold, the flashing eye, the reddening cheek, but more than all I love the fire in youthful limbs that wakes desire and never satisfies.
He was pretty good, man, and it was well read. He that sounded like one of his younger poems when he was still a Nietzschean atheist. Whereas later,
his first volume of poetry, yeah.
Later he wouldn't say guff like that because he became more Anglican in a certain sense, and he wasn't Nietzschean and wasn't atheist anymore. When you're youthful, you can be a Nietzschean. I mean, Bowden, to his credit, I suppose, kept his Nietzscheanism going until the end. But Powell moved away from that.
You say it's good. I mean, I'm not sure I agree. I mean, basically, it's faux A. Houseman, a Shropshire lad. So if you want to read poetry like this,
I'm saying it's better than you might think, and than you might sort of imagine in parodies.
That's Sophie Hannah. But here we go. Yeah, just read a Shropshire lad. You can't mess about. You can't go wrong.
A Shropshire lad is hard to top. Do you remember Hitchens on Question Time reciting it?
What, the whole of the Shropshire lad? God, no.
He just does that famous bit. But he gets one word wrong, but he quite brilliantly reads it. Apart from that, into my heart an air that kills from yon far country blows. What are those blue remembered hills? What spires? What farms are those? That is the land of lost content. I see it shining plain. Those happy highways where I went and cannot come again. That's just from memory. But I did it.
It nods and curtsies and recovers when the wind blows above. The nettle on the graves of lovers that hanged themselves for love. The nettle nods, the wind blows over. The man, he does not move. The lover of the grave, the lover that hanged himself for love. A. Houseman was also gay. But
these gays, man, they are good at poetry.
They are. No, they're good at poetry and colors, good with colors, and
there was one great, he was a sort of devotee of Houseman, Powell, as I'm sure you know, and there was one moment where Powell made some tiny correction or suggestion to Houseman, and Houseman sent some terse agreement. It was like a massive moment for Powell. It was just like, those were days where we had incredible standards, Ed, and there were giants like Houseman and Powell. These were giants, Ed. They were
we are but minnows in comparison to. We are late stage Rome. You know, our poetry. I'm trying to find something that's in line.
Well, while you do that, I'll just say to the chat, I urge everyone to the ever dwindling chat. I say to the chat, look up that Peter Hitchens moment on Question Time where he recites Houseman. Though he gets one word wrong, instead of that is the land of lost content, he says it is land of lost content. Though his version's arguably slightly better. But check that out. It's Hitchens just schooling everyone on it's such a great thing because it's all these. Liz Truss is actually on it. I think it's just one of all these kind of. Can't remember if she's on that one. It's all these lib politicians who have nothing to say, and then he's asked to recite a poem, and he does it. It's so good. Anything else, Ed?
He got very grumpy with me when I said that we should have bombed Japan because they were disrespecting us.
Was this on Twitter?
Yeah.
Because my former guest booker did ask him to come on my podcast. He said he'd think about it. I was too scared to ask him. How do I get guests? This is a kind of in lieu of a guest. This is kind of something. You're a kind of guest. You are a guest, but you are a guest, but it's a stream rather than a guest episode. But I just find myself, I can't ask them. I had a guy doing it for a bit, and he was so good, but then he's not doing it anymore. I just can't ask people.
Well, you paid somebody to ask guests for you.
He was so good though. He got me all these guests, and I got much better views. I mean, Starkey got 380,000, so he was good. The reason is I'm just too shy, and I can't push people.
Yeah, but I got Starkey by just asking him.
Yes, and I can't. You see, even though I could just.
Although my interview with Starkey got far less views. Mine was on a bigger channel.
Better percent.
I guess it must have been.
I haven't seen yours.
But I didn't. I just generally I find you ask, or better still, you know someone that knows them, and you get them to ask for you. That's the other thing.
That's good. Yeah, I can't see. I just can't. Someone said you got a network, Nick. I can't network. I can't do social events. I just can't do it. So
yeah, you should have come. You should have come to the event that I was at. It was great fun. It was tremendous fun.
I turned down everything. It's terrible, but I just can't.
Have a laugh. I'm coming to England in a few weeks' time. Why don't you come out to play?
Maybe I could if it's just you. You know, when you invite me to these dinners and I can't do them, and you want to eat foreign slop. If it's just you or someone else I know, and we're eating English food, then I'll consider it.
Right. So if it's fish and chips,
yeah,
we could go to Fiscotech, which is the fish and chip restaurant near Waterloo Station where Bowden used to go.
Well, don't tell them because now we'll get stalked by the whole chat.
Yeah, but I'm not telling them a date, am I? I just say a couple.
They'll wait. Some of my fans will wait every day outside.
Well, then we'd be sleeping outside Fiscotech, waiting for us to come there. Okay.
Principled uncertainty says Nick is right. People are exhausting. Absolutely. Nick the Hermit. Yep. Absolutely. So anyway, we'll figure all that out, Ed. Thanks so much. We did a very decent chunk of streaming here.
Pleasure.
And we got your expertise on Bowden. Thank you in the chat, everyone. Dixon Cox is out tomorrow, back to the normal topical stuff. Anything you want to plug, Ed?
Well, I'd like to, yeah, obviously. I'll plug my book, which is Shaman of the Radical Right, the life and mind of Jonathan Bowden. And then I'll plug my other book, which is over here behind the black curtain.
And I'm on the centre left, but it's interesting academically to hear Ed's take on the right.
Yes, which is Woke Eugenics, How Social Justice is a Mask of Social Darwinism, where I argue that basically wokeness is a selection event to inadvertently breed us back to genetic health and basedness. And if you don't know my channel, do subscribe to it, jollyheretic.com on Substack, and Jolly Heretic on the old at Jolly Heretic on Twitter, and Jolly Heretic on YouTube. And
yes,
yeah. Well, we'll see you all in a huge queue then at the fish and chip restaurant.
And you can get all the links to Ed's channels in the description. I just quickly want to say, and I've been interviewed Ed about both those books, actually, the Bowden one and Woke Eugenics, on this channel and on nickdixon.net for the full versions. Go to nickdixon.net. And incredibly, I talked to him about Woke Eugenics while still being employed by GB News. I don't know how that works. Remember you the other day, that woman, last thing I'll say, but that woman asked you on Twitter, who are these mutants? And I just thought that's so funny that she had no idea what she was walking into because you made the case.
Oh, yes, I saw. Yes.
I just thought that was very funny. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Ed. And we'll see you very soon. And goodbye.
Goodbye.